we're back at St Mary the Virgin in Rotherhithe. And this time we're going deep, deep, deep.
Yeah. Maybe you can cut the last 3 bars out of the edit of the video, because that sounded a bit rubbish.
How does a pro organist approach an organ he's never seen or played before for the very first time? An organ that was put together when Mozart was just 8 years old.
I'm George Herbert. I'm an organist. I live around London. I work 1 day a week at the Chapel Royal in Hampton Court Palace.
You're arriving here, you've never seen this organ before. You said you thought some of the pieces that you bought would be good for this organ. So what's in your mind?
Before I came here this morning, I went on a website which is called the NPOR, which is the National Pipe Organ Register, which has got details of loads of the pipe organs in the country on, and you just type in the address. So I just typed in Rotherhithe, and a few churches come up, you click on the right one and it shows you what the instrument is, which shows you what stops there are, which informs what music you might bring. So I saw that this organ, for instance, has got only 1 pedal stop, and it's not got much by way of play aids, is what they're called, which are sort of buttons that you find underneath more modern romantic instruments, which when you press them pull out certain stops and push certain ones back in, which gives you the flexibility to have pieces which change dynamic quite quickly.
Okay, yeah, quick dynamics. If you had an assistant, you could potentially do them?
Exactly. But also the sort of stops that I could see from the website were here are mostly the kind of music that you'd expect to find, the kind of stops you'd expect to need in music from about sort of late 18th century backwards. So kind of Mozart backwards, basically towards Buxtehude and Bach and people. So I brought some Buxtehude and some Bach and a bit of Mendelssohn actually, because it's not got any stop changes throughout it, which makes it easier to work here.
And is there anything else that you researched beforehand?
Well, I looked on the website and I guessed from the date of the instrument and from the layout, it looking fairly old, that probably the keys would be quite heavy, or when all the keyboards are coupled together. I could be wrong about that, but my guess is that when all the keyboards are coupled together, it would be quite heavy to play, which is kind of apropos of nothing, just quite useful to know. I looked at the position of the organ in the church, because there are photos on this website too, so I could see it was at the back, so would therefore speak into the space. So when we arrived, just as we arrived before you turned the camera on, we were talking downstairs, having a listen to the acoustic of the church as well, to see what that might be like, taking a guess from how much carpeting there is, what kind of curtains, what the ceiling is like. It looks like quite a resonant acoustic, and it sounds like it too when we're talking.
Yes,
we can hear
as we're talking, we can hear it.
Which has an impact on how you might go about playing a piece. If you're in a very resonant place and you're playing a huge instrument and it's in the middle of the building, it's necessary to make the kind of clarity a much greater consideration than you would maybe in a small church with not much acoustic. Here it doesn't matter too much because it's not super washy, but other places...
What does that mean, washy?
Washy is like in St Paul's Cathedral, where if you play a chord it lasts for 10 seconds, and so if you play anything too fast, all the notes kind of merge into each other and it becomes a wash of sound rather than being much clearer. Here it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem because it's not too big, it's just probably resonant enough to give everything a nice sort of ring to the sound without things getting unclear.
What do you do next?
Find the on switch. Okay. So I can see there's some switches here. Let's see what these do. Let's turn one on.
So I see some lights coming on.
Yeah.
Which are important.
Yeah. Normally one of the lights, if the pedal light comes on, that often means that the engine's going to start as well.
Okay, but you'd expect to hear something going to good...
Yeah. I can't hear anything at the moment. Let's have a look. Okay, I think we need to look a little bit harder.
Is this usual, where it's kind of like the mystery of...
It's not usual. It's not unusual. This could be really interesting 10 minutes for your video, couldn't it? Oh, here we are. It's here, hidden in this little cupboard.
Okay.
Start and stop. There we go. There we go.
Wow.
There we go.
Straight away. And is that normal that it's on immediately?
Pretty common, yeah. So, what next?
To me, the stops are kind of in positions, but they don't look like particularly common positions, but perhaps I'm wrong about that.
No, they're not. So I basically played one instrument for 4 years when I was at university, and the stops were laid out in certain places such that, each keyboard was in a certain place, I knew where it was. This, it turns out, I later discovered is quite an uncommon arrangement. So then I went and played anywhere else. And, in the heat of the moment, I was looking to grab some stops to make things a bit louder or softer or whatever. And kept pulling out the wrong stuff because I was in the wrong place and used to the wrong thing. So This doesn't kind of look massively unusual to me. No, it's normal that they're kind of going up by the side of the keyboards. So we've got our 3 keyboards: swell, great, and choir. The great is the one that makes the most kind of makes the strongest sound. That's the kind of bedrock of playing for hymns, for instance. You might use that keyboard. The swell is normally set, well, not always, but it's often set a little bit further back or a little higher up, so it sounds a bit more distant. And the reason it's called swell is because it's enclosed within shutters, in a box with shutters at the front, and you use what's called the swell pedal to make the shutters open and close. On instruments that are more modern than this, so kind of romantic instruments from about the 19th century onwards, you'd expect this to be just a kind of a pedal, like sort of like a big sustain pedal on a piano that you have sort of in the middle of the foot pedals, just around here, which you can just open and shut. And often I just have my left foot playing the pedals and my right foot just sitting on this expression pedal, which makes the shutters open and close, makes it louder or softer. Anyway, that's why it's called the swell, and that is often at the top.
But it's louder or softer, but it's binary. It's loud or quiet. It's not. There's nothing in between.
No, it's a gradation. Yeah,
it is a gradation.
Now, what's different?
Okay.
What's different here is that because this is a rather older instrument. I'm actually not sure when it was made. This will tell us here. This organ was built in 1764 and enlarged in 1800, and then altered a bit more in the 19th century, and then restored in the 20th century. So built in the 1700s, it doesn't surprise me, therefore, that instead of kind of pedals that sit in the middle of the footboard, we've got what's called a ratchet box or a ratchet pedal, which is here.
Yeah.
This will make things louder and softer, and this platform at the bottom holds it in place. So you'll kick the platform out of the way, and that will, open and close things. So it's
Hello. We've got Father Nicholls here.
Great, fantastic.
So you might like to.
And it's all from here, is it?
One is from here, and this is all here.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
Nice to see you again. Briefly.
So the position of the platform down here will make these shutters open and close, which you might be able to hear.
Okay, so down is loud, which is kind of what I'd expect.
Yeah. And then the stick that comes down, because it's got this.
And that locks it into place.
Locks it into place, exactly. Yeah. Okay. It's got the little the bit that juts out.
Did it sound like it was getting slightly louder and quieter, or was that on and off?
I think it felt to me like it was getting louder and then quieter. So start at the top again. Have a listen.
Oh yeah. So not binary. So is that an effect that you'd play around with, or is that?
I do all the time,
okay.
And lots of people, well, a few of my friends and teachers don't like how much I play around with it, but I was a pianist first of all, and I'd like to try and make my organ playing sound as sort of pianistic as I can, I think. It's because it's often the case on the organ that you don't really have that many ways of generating sort of expressive gestures or whatever, like getting louder and softer on a piano, which you can just do with how you touch it.
Yes.
Or changing the colour in a very subtle way, because you've got to pull a stop out, and if you go from having 1 to having 2, that's a bit of a kind of stepping. It's like it's a bit more of a ladder than on the piano, for instance, where you can just do it very smoothly. But when I play, I like to try and slightly mitigate these things by using this expression pedal lots to.
But when you're doing the stops, that is binary. That's on or off.
Yeah, exactly.
And halfway isn't halfway.
Halfway sounds a bit rubbish. Halfway sounds like this. You can hear that it kind of.
I don't know. So that's an effect, man.
Yeah.
I think maybe this is the musical moment where we go, hang on, what can we do?
We change the way people play. Yeah. So yes, I use it quite a lot. Some people don't. It's a question of taste, really.
Yeah.
If you're on a larger instrument in a larger space, you can use this sort of box to slightly mask when you put stops on and off. So if you open these shutters gradually all the way, and then quickly close them while you pull another stop out, you can't really tell that a new one is coming on. So there are ways of masking it. It won't be so easy here because the organ's a little bit older, and this sort of expression subtlety thing isn't so much of a consideration. And just to finish answering your first question, the bottom keyboard is called the choir keyboard.
Yes.
It often is towards the front, so it's kind of nearer the choir. It's sort of, on European instruments from about the same time, they have what's called a rook positif, which means, rook is back, and so it will sit. If the player sits like this, the rook positif will sit here. So it's the part of the organ that's closest to the choir and the congregation sort of speak very, very clearly into the building.
So there might actually be pipes forward from the position of the organist.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
in this. Not in
Not
this.
here,
concert.
no, but in other places.
Yeah.
And I think, well, let's see if we're right. Well, it sounds to me like that's a bit further, that's a bit closer towards the player than the swell, which is at the back. You can hear that that's coming from sort of nearer to your ears, I think.
Yeah.
And then you've got the pedal board, which is what you play with your feet. And these three, I'm not quite sure what these are going to do. These three switches here, I suspect there'll probably be 3 different versions of the stops that you can have out. So let's have a look. Yeah, so that's pushed a few out there, as you can see. And a few more, and then a few more. Just on the one keyboard. So that if you're in the middle of, swapping between verses of a hymn or something, you can press one of these and quickly get out 3 stops, which will otherwise be a bit of a pain to pull out all at once.
Imagine that you're doing a recital this evening, and it's the recital of your life. Yeah. So would you be spending some time going, okay, these are the particular stops that are being pulled out. This is the effect. Are you going to be playing around with that and making sure?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Particularly here, which is, well, it doesn't seem to me that there's any flexibility. You can't change what these switches do on more modern instruments, which is what I'm more used to playing. There's a button you can press. Well, you'll typically have a load of buttons between the keyboards as well, which you can press to just pull certain stops. So you can be playing a chord or a scale or something, and then you can kind of press as you go along, which changes the stops as you go without having to stop, playing. And there's a button that you can press which changes what each of these different aids does. So number 1 could be just a stop on its own, or I could pull another one out and press set, and that would mean that button just did these 2 rather than just the one. But that's not a consideration here because we've not got that. But if we were somewhere else which had these assistants, these playing aids, I'd spend quite a lot of time figuring out what the sort of default that they did was, and then playing around with what different combinations I might use instead to suit my own tastes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then let's get yourself sat down, and we'll.
So ideally, I'd like to have this bench a little bit further back, but as you
Okay.
can see, it's kind of baked into the floor a little bit. So this is the furthest back it can go, which will just make things a little bit more uncomfortable, but that's okay. So the first thing that I do at this point is I kind of go through basically every stop of the instrument to see what it sounds like. So I'll start in the middle. So we can hear that's quite a nice sort of fluty sound. It's maybe worth also saying that the names of the stops are not totally generic, but they're quite common between instruments. So I know that if it's a stopped diapason, that's a kind of quite soft fluty sound, like this is, well, a bit higher especially. A bit softer than the open diapason, which is a bit more like a cello. A slightly thicker sound. And we've got 2, so one of them might be louder. This one maybe. Yeah, you can hear there's a slightly different tone colour there. Very slightly. This one's a little bit brighter than this one, for instance. A trumpet speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Okay, but so when you say brighter, so I sing choirs, and when the chorus master says brighter, what he means is everyone's singing a bit flat. Can we?
Okay.
That's what they normally mean, but that's not what you mean. I mean, it literally did sound brighter, but I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
I don't know how it works. I'm not very good at the whole organ mechanics, how things have always how things work, but.
Is it just higher? Is it just?
It's not just higher. I think that what happens is that because of the specific way, this could be completely rubbish. So I apologise to any viewers who know much more about this, which is probably most of them.
We'll get it in the comments.
I think that the way the pipe is built means that you'll hear many more of the higher resonances of the harmonic series. So every note resonates at lots of pitches above the note that you mainly hear. The strongest partial, which is what it's called, is the foundation, which is the one that you play, because it's often easier from a lower note to hear more of the higher frequencies. I suspect that the way this pipe has been built means that more of the higher natural frequencies of the harmonic series will sound than with this one, which sounds a little bit darker, because you can hear, there's slightly fewer of those higher frequencies are allowed to come through. If you play a synthesizer, you've got, I think it's called a low pass filter and a high pass filter. So as you play a note, you kind of turn this switch, and it changes how many of the high frequencies come through, how many of the low frequencies come through, and you hear a similar effect. So that would be towards the low end of the frequency filter, and this would be towards the higher end. And if you turn it far enough, then you'll hear lots of the overtones. So like in throat singing, for instance, you can hear the sort of the double stopped singing kind of thing, where you can hear lots of notes at once.
Yeah.
That's an example where you can hear lots and lots of the high frequencies all at once. Meanwhile, I can't think of a counter example, but this certainly is kind of just the note itself. So I think that's what's happening. Then as you carry on, trumpet speaks for itself. 15th I know is going to be very high. Whoa. And that's not just because of the name. The number of the number that's on the stop indicates how high the pitch is going to be. So 8 foot is the same pitch as a piano. So if I played the equivalent notes on a piano, the same pitches would come out. As you halve the length of the pipe from 8 feet to 4 feet, we get twice as high.
It gets higher.
It gets higher. So that's 8. That's 4. That's 2. Some instruments have 1. Some instruments have, I think some instruments have a half as well. I'm not quite sure. And 16. Oh my God, this isn't going to go in. 16, which is over here, is twice as low. So I know that it's going to be higher because of the number of feet that it says on the stop, but also because of the word 15th. That often means this kind of slightly brighter, harsher sound, which is called a principal, compared to a flute sound.
So I'm just going to be really naive here. So pulling it out turns it on.
Exactly.
So what's the default? What foot is? What's the default when nothing's on?
When nothing's on, no sound comes out.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have to pull out the stop. This is where I'm a bit shaky on my mechanics. I think you have to pull out the stop to do whatever it takes to open up the hole in the pipe for the sound to come through.
Sure.
So this kind of, it's sort of like flicking a plug switch. It kind of does it kind of does something to the circuit of the wind, But
you went right for that one first.
Yeah.
Why did you go for that one first?
Because it's a sort of 8 foot pitch, piano pitch, and because I know that this is going to be quite a gentle sound, and for the pieces that I brought, that's going to be quite important.
Okay.
Yeah, and I tend to start from the quieter end and then get to the louder end when I'm seeing what things are like for the first time.
Okay. And roughly, how long will you normally spend if you are preparing for a recital of some sort? How long will you spend at an unfamiliar organ in preparation? How long will you give yourself?
Well, it's more a question of how long the church or the chapel will give you, which is
really?
Yeah. Ideally, for a recital that's half an hour long, I'd want at least 3 hours.
Okay.
For a concert that's upwards of an hour, you'd want probably best part of a day, or 6 hours or 8 hours or something.
And if I can compare that to what you do for a piano, how long would you normally want to sit at a piano for a similar half-hour recital?
I'd want to spend a good amount of time at the piano beforehand, because you've got to, get used to the space and get used to the instrument as well, which is going to be different from what you're used to. But I think it's probably less. It's not quite so absolutely essential.
Yes.
It's still very important, but it's not quite so completely essential that you get, let's say 5 or 6 times the length of the program to practice on the instrument, because
the geography is the same.
The geography is the same, exactly, and probably I would have thought, well, from experience, I think that the sort of fundamentals of playing the piano remain kind of the same between lots of instruments. Things obviously change, some instruments are heavier and lighter, some make louder sounds, some make quieter sounds. But less changes between 2 pianos than changes between 2 organs. There are no 2 organs in the world that are exactly the same, which makes our job quite hard, I think.
Have you played some of the digital organs?
Yeah.
And surely they're the same?
Yeah.
Exactly the same? Or
yeah, you can have. Yeah, there are often models that are exactly the same. I think it's the case that you can slightly custom make them for a higher fee, and you can also, this is quite funny. You can load real pipe instruments into the digital organ. So people go and sample the organ at Salisbury Cathedral or something to make a pack which you can then install into your digital organ, for instance. So yeah, these digital organs can be the same because they're kind of their software and hardware rather than being pipes which is kind of speaking into an acoustic. But talking about actual pipe organs, no 2 are the same, really. So then I'd carry on and I'd go all the way through the instrument and I'd see what everything sounds like. These which say 3 ranks or 5 ranks are stops that that don't have just one pitch that they sound at. They speak at, well, this one speaks at 5 pitches at once, for instance. I think cornet is normally 8 feet and 4 feet, and 2 2/3 feet, and 2 feet, and 1 3/5 feet. I think that's right. And these ones that are 2/3 and 3/5, they speak.
Have you passed an exam to do that? That
well,
seemed to be off the top of your head.
I think your viewers might fault me on this, but you can hear that compared to this, which speaks at just this bottom C pitch. This one, whoop, if it's going to sound. Do you hear it has that slightly kind of strange twanginess at the top?
Yeah.
That's because there are pitches that are sounding which, rather than being the note that I'm playing, are actually an octave and a fifth of what I'm playing, or an octave and a third. So I think you can sort of, I think that's what's sounding actually to make, well, these would be rather higher, but these are actually the pitches that are sounding to make this one stop's worth of notes. Whoops. Which gives it that kind of strange kind of colour. Yeah. So then, yeah, I would carry on, and I might just quickly do this actually before I start playing.
Yes, please do. And also, so you're playing with the pedals as well.
Yeah, this has only got one pedal stop, which is unusual, and is slightly restricting in terms of what you can play. You wouldn't really want to play a big, loud fugue by Bach with only one pedal stop, because you want to have that slightly greater clarity. My own personal taste as well is to have the bass as your real bedrock of the sound, which then the higher notes sit kind of on top of. Which, if you've only got one stop in the pedal, makes things quite difficult. That being said, we've got these stops over here, which are called couplers, which sort of...
They're the thing that tie the things down here to things up here?
Exactly, yeah. So they tie the keyboards together. So great to pedals, for instance. Here's our great stops over here. I'll pull one out, and this means now that if I play the pedal note, the equivalent note on this keyboard will sound, which will be this one here.
Yeah.
If I turn the great stop off, then the sound stops. It will come back. But you can see, because of how this instrument's built, that the coupling means that I don't know quite what it is. Again, I've got very shaky knowledge on mechanics and things, but the note is pulled down that you play with your feet on the equivalent keyboard.
You're normally a shoes-on player?
Oh yeah. Stubbed my toe a few too many times for my liking. Yeah, I know that Francis Bushell in your last video, he was a socks man, wasn't he? But I've come out with bloodied feet from a few too many socks only practice sessions. Yeah. So see how the rest of this sounds. So in this process, I'm listening out for sounds I particularly like. I kind of prefer, I think, slightly more. Well, I'm not very keen on very sort of fronted, quite kind of zingy sounds like this one here, for instance. I don't think that's particularly easy on the ear, that stop, so I'll probably avoid that as much as I can.
Okay.
My sort of benchmark is, and I think one of the most useful things that organists can do is playing to people who don't play the organ. So musicians who are cellists or pianists or violinists or whatever, seeing what they think of a performance. I think probably organists get quite used to slightly unpleasant sounds quite easily. I think that, well, I know from talking to friends who play other instruments or who don't play instruments at all, that can be an immediate turn-off. So my sister, for instance, who's not a musician by training, although she's very musical, she wouldn't like the sound of this stop when played in a big chord, because she just thinks it's a bit jarring on the ear. Meanwhile, she'd probably rather prefer the sound of these three up here, which is slightly softer, slightly more gentle, not quite so abrasive.
I mean, I can feel myself being subliminally influenced by you, because I go, oh yeah, it really does sound harsh, but it's also kind of part of the grandness of the sound, I guess.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And it can be a good effect at the end of. There's a piece that I love playing, which is called the Richer Car by Bach, and it's about 10 minutes long, and it's a long fugue. And it has this amazing build from just one voice at the start playing this weird kind of meandering tune to being at the end this really rich, full harmony with loads of parts all at once. And for these quite kind of gnarly endings, these really big crunchy finales, it's quite actually effective, I think, to have the slightly kind of kind of reedier, harsher sounds on, because it gives the sort of cutting edge to the sound that suits the harmony. So that piece finishes. Well, I'll play it once without all the harsh stuff, and then I'll stick it all on and then see what you think.
Oh yes.
This piece finishes. how does it finish now? Like, I can't remember how it goes now, but it's got all this kind of lots of kind of rich chromatic harmony, which if it's just played on its own, is sort of fine. If you stick loads of all this kind of reedy stuff on, then it gives it a kind of edginess which I think suits it quite well, as though it was a choir singing a text about, well, say, you know, if it was a psalm about, you know, thunder and, you know, the waves, and one of these kind of more vengeful texts, you know, having a slightly more gritty sound suits that. Yeah. Nevertheless, I'm listening out when I'm setting up for the sounds that I like most of all. At first glance, I think that first impression is really important, because you can get used to these things very easily. Like, you can get used to a ringing in your ears quite easily. I think that much like that, you can get used to, you know, this being unpleasant quickly if you spend 3 hours preparing. Meanwhile, the audience who comes in, they might think in the first 5 minutes, oh, don't fancy this, and clear off, you know. Yeah. So I like these stops up here most of all. I like that they're slightly out of tune with each other. I don't think that's intentional, but it gives it a kind of, there's a sort of vibrato effect there, I think.
Hang on, so play it again so I can see if I can detect the out of tuneness that you're...
Well, if you hear one on its own,
then
I'm going to put the stop on, and you might be able to hear there's a sort of beating in the sound.
Oh, yes.
Do you hear that sort of woo?
Yeah.
That's because it's slightly out of tune with each other. And I think that's actually quite a nice effect, sort of like, you know, string instruments playing with vibrato or something. I think this stop also is really nice. It's not got too much, well, I think sometimes singers can sound a bit breathy. That can be the case on organ pipes too. This one, for instance, well, a bit lower down. Which one? Maybe it was this one. Can you hear there's a little bit of kind of, there's a bit of excess around the sound, which you don't get on this one. That's slightly more pure, concentrated sound, I think.
I'm not hearing the difference between the two.
Bit higher up, okay. Do you hear that as well as the pitch? There's a bit of kind of around the outside. Very slight. Maybe, yeah. Compared to this one. It hasn't got that kind of fluff around the outside. It's a small thing, and I get a little bit too cut off about it, I think. Nevertheless, I'm listening out for that all the time when I'm
yeah, but it's those small effects that make all the difference in the whole thing. But you're saying you've got enough freedom by what just altering the stops here?
Yeah.
And that won't be marked on the score.
Sometimes it is. On the pieces that I've brought, which are a bit older, composers haven't quite got to the point of marking things on yet. Maybe in these Mendelssohn pieces they have. Well, so he writes in this score, you see it says clav 2, which is clavier 2, which is the second keyboard. So I might play that on the quieter keyboards. That's, well, 1, 2, and 3 are sort of, 1 is always the strongest one on German instruments, which he would have used. It's called the Hauptwerk, the sort of main work. The second is often the swell keyboard, which is this one up here, which is expressive and within those shutters, which we talked about before. Yep. Or maybe it's this this choir keyboard down here. Generally something a bit quieter. This is a kind of early indication of what stops you might use, because it tells you what keyboard to play on.
Okay, so hang on. So I'm looking at this piece of music, and first of all, you said it says clav 2. So none of the words you used earlier had clav in. No,
just to kind of, that's the German alternative, clavier, keyboard, piano, whatever.
Okay, so that's just the German, fine. Yeah. And then, are we saying that that's the top keyboard, that's the second, that's the forgive me.
I know, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. This is actually, that's the right hand, that's the left hand, that's the feet.
Okay.
And the words, clav 2, clav 1, indicate what keyboard to play on, rather than what's called stave, which is the set of lines that the music is written on. Rather than that, which shows you what hand or foot to play with.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Okay.
So I know from how it's written that this would probably be taken in the left hand. Oh no, this is different because there's 4 staves. So let's try a better example. So this would be, here we are. This is the end of another sonata. Right hand is the top line. Left hand is the middle line. Pedal is the bottom line. Okay. On a piano, you just have the top 2, right hand and left hand. On the organ, we have this extra one at the bottom, which is for the pedal. Yeah.
And that's because you're actually playing notes with the pedals. It's not
exactly. Yeah. So that tells you what feet to use.
Is that a usual thing that there's a library nearby the organ?
Yeah. So we are, this piece, Fugue in A major by Johann Georg Albrechtsberger, which I've not heard of before. Here we have, at the top, manual. Man means manual, which is the hands.
Yeah.
8-foot and 2-foot flutes. So that's the kind of sound that you would use. 8-foot flute is that first one that we went to, the very first stop that I pulled out.
Yep.
And the 2-foot is a similar sound, sounding 2 octaves higher. The pedal, 16-foot, that's the kind of usual pedal pitch, which is 1 octave below what's printed. That's how it sounds. 1 octave below what's played.
Yep.
Plus manual, which means that the keyboard is coupled to the pedals, like we did with Great Pedal a second ago. Lots of later composers from the kind of 19th to 20th centuries will include it in the flow of the music as it goes along. They'll write bits and bobs in about what stops, and if it's a composer who's writing for a specific instrument, they'll write the specific stop name as well. But these sort of earlier pieces that I've brought don't tend to have indications of what stops to pull out.
So would you say that older composers tend to give you more freedom because they're not prescriptive about things like that?
There is an argument to say that, yeah. On the other hand, there's
there's another one.
Well, on the other hand, there are sort of schools of thought, and my teacher when I was at school, for instance, was quite into his historically informed performance, which is a kind of school of practice and a school of theory which tries to replicate as far as possible the sounds of the instruments that were being used at the composer's time. So he taught me, for instance, a very specific set of registration schemes that you might use for music by Bach, which generally use this brighter stuff. Then I went to university, so he, I think, sort of got me into a bit of a headspace of thinking that there wasn't very much freedom, because there was kind of a way of doing it. And I'm grateful for him having taught me this, because, that is quite instructive. Nevertheless, I then went to university.
You need to know what the rules are before you can break them.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. Then I went to university, and then I had this teacher who studied with Lenglet, who was a kind of French, a 20th century French organist and composer, and of the kind of French Romantic school, which was very kind of pianistic in its approach, I think. And I started playing him a fugue on these very bright sounds. So it was something like this, I think, and the tune goes. And I played him this first line. He said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he said, "That sounds horrible. Do you not hear that? It's just like not a very pleasant sound. And you're doing it in this very weird, detached way." This was from the kind of historically informed performance school. And so he said, "Why don't you instead try it like this, just on these 8-foot sounds, and much smoother." So they're very different approaches to the same music, both as valid as each other, in my view. I know which one that I would choose, and I know which one both of my teachers would choose, and that's completely fine. And it's good that there's a plurality of approaches. But in a way, in a way you're completely right, because there's nothing written out. There is greater freedom. Yeah.
And does it mark speed and things like that?
Often not. No.
Okay.
No. This earlier stuff, this kind of music by Bach and books too, that often doesn't. I think there are a few in this book which do, but that's anomalous. Really, normally you just kind of get a sense from the feel of the music. Fairly instinctively what speed you might take something at. It's also the case with pieces that are quite famous, that have been recorded lots, that you might have heard them loads when you were studying, and subliminally just assumed that a particular speed was a particular speed. There's a 2-part invention by Bach, which is in F minor. It goes like this. I think maybe he writes lento, which means slow at the start or something. But then in the lockdown, I was kind of playing around with this stuff, and I realised actually he played at this speed. Kind of works too. It's very different, but I think it's with lots of recordings around the place that are all fairly similar. You kind of learn particular speeds and things. So maybe it's not just about what's written, but what you kind of know in your mind as well. Yeah.
And part of what the audience expects.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got to comment on it, because you just did this magical thing where you've just played, you've got some pieces in your head and you've just played them.
Yeah.
So how is that possible? on how often do you need music, and when you're playing, are you generally using music, or are you going, okay, I've learnt it, or do you look at the music, it's like Mozart, it's in my noodle, you know?
I think that organists, generally speaking, use music much more than other players because, well, it's like I said before, if you're a pianist and you're playing a piano concerto and you're going from instrument to instrument to instrument, the nuances of how you might approach a particular instrument or space change with each environment that you're in. But the fundamental thing, which is the notes that you're going to play and where they are in relation to each other and where the pedals are and what they do, the 2 or 3 pedals on the piano, they don't really change. There's less variability between pianos than there are between organs. If I'm taking this music that I've brought today from place to place, I'm probably not going to play it by memory because just practically I need to write down what stops I'm going to pull out, you know, and what keyboard I'm going to play on at a specific time and where I'm going to maybe move from one to the other quickly. There's greater variability in the kind of practical considerations when you're approaching an organ than there are in lots of other instruments. Therefore, organists almost always play with the music. I prefer playing without, but I'd rarely do it because, well, if you're playing in churches, you just got to get through a lot of stuff. You know, if you're playing for 6 or 7 services a week, you've got to prepare, 14 or 15 voluntaries a week, one for before, one for after. And there's not enough hours in a day to learn all that music, really. I wish there were. I did play a piece once when I was at school. There's this amazing piece by Poulenc, his concerto for organ and strings and timpani, which I practiced really, really hard. And I knew the instrument I was going to be playing it on. And so I learned it off copy, and it made it much more freeing, I think, to play. Lots of musicians agree that, well, some don't, because, and this is completely valid, of course, the kind of extra performance pressure of not having the music with you and the fear of memory slips it makes performing without music more stressful than freeing. My personal view is that if I've learned a piece off copy, I like playing it without the music because in the same way as learning pieces by ear, especially with, if you're teaching a choir piece, teaching it by ear can often lead to a more exciting sound, better breathing together, greater focus in rehearsals, better ensemble, because you listen more than you read. I think it's a real danger in classical music particularly because it's so sheet music based that you spend all your time reading and not enough time kind of trying to express anything. And I don't know, I sometimes fall into the trap myself because I'm a fairly quick sight reader of, I'll stick a piece up on the music stand and I'll read through it and it will mean not very much to me or to anyone else because I'm just going through the motions a little bit. I think that playing without music means that you've got a bit more headspace to kind of get into the kind of emotional heart of what's going on.
From the point of view of sight reading, so there was a piece of music you were showing me a second ago, which had like a billion notes on it.
Yeah.
I don't know much about anything, but that looks. Some of this stuff looks quite complicated to me.
I wouldn't stick at this up there to sight read. Not in a second. I might conceivably, if I really needed a piece to play at short notice, I might possibly put this one on the stand because it's andante is sort of slower speed, walking speed. There's not very many notes. You can there's enough time to process what's going on the page. I don't particularly enjoy giving sight read performances. I think it can be a bit soul destroying sometimes for the performer because, like I said before, you aren't really able to say much with your playing. Whereas if you're really inside a piece, then it's different.
Will you read through the complete piece, or will you always sit at an organ and start up, with an instrument and start playing with it and seeing how it sounds, or will you can you just look at it and go, oh, I see where this is?
If it's a piece that I'm playing for the first time, I normally just try and read through it in a slightly ham-fisted way once or twice to get the feel of the kind of roadmap in my head, if you like. Before then,
you won't go to Spotify and listen to it.
No, I think the danger of doing that is that you then kind of just play it like the first recording that you heard, which is the case with some pieces that I play. I listen to a recording and then I start learning it. The pieces that I feel like I'd have a bit more ownership of in my own playing are pieces that I've not heard anyone else play first, or if I have, it was in a recital and I can't remember very well what it was like. So if there was a piece from this book that I liked the look of, or that I heard once in a recital and I liked the sound of, I would not listen to it while I was learning it. I might, once I felt really kind of confident in my own playing of it and felt like I had a really clear conception of it, then I might listen to someone else to see if I had to see if they gave me any ideas. Yeah. Much like you take a piece that you knew well to a teacher who might have a different approach from you, and then you can decide what you like and what you don't like, and then play, accordingly.
Do you want to?
Sure. Okay.
Play something. He's gone straight for the Bach.
Straight for the Bach. Yeah. This is one. Ein Gott in der Hosea. And so these are chorale preludes. So these are German hymn tunes. All the pieces in this book, which Bach and lots of other composers have and still do turn into little organ pieces. So I'm actually not sure what there are some editions of these pieces which give you the chorale tune written out first on the first page. This one doesn't. So I'm not totally sure what the exact tune that he's based this on is, but you can see he writes chorale here in the left hand. So this is the kind of main tune. So you know that this is going to be the bit that you bring out.
Okay.
This is kind of based on an old kind of German school of giving a kind of hymn play over. So in this country, if I was playing, Bread of Heaven, I'd probably play. And then stop, and then everyone comes in, guide me. Meanwhile, a kind of old German improvisation school of playing for him would be to improvise something along these lines, something a bit more complex. I'm not going to try and do that with Bread of Heaven. I think I'll make a fool of myself. But I hope you kind of get the idea. So this piece, I know because I've played the piece before, and I kind of have a feel for it, what sort of sound I'd like it to be, what I'd like the feeling to be. Although, as you can see, there's no indication, so it could just as easily be this sort of style. But I think it sounds a bit naff. It's a bit four square and a bit kind of bombastic and stiff upper lip and whatever. I think there's lots of kind of. I think there's lots of suppleness and beauty in these kind of quite mellifluous melodic lines, which it's hard to kind of get the feel of when you're playing on lots of loud stops. So I'm going to stick all this stuff in, and I know that I want to play it only on these stops that are 8 feet, or maybe that are 8 feet with a few soft 4 feet stops as well, because that gives us a kind of softer sound. However, I know that because this tune, the chorale, is the one that I want to bring out the most, that I want to save these loudest stops for that. So these first 3 lines, which are just left hand and pedal, I might look towards the choir then, to see what stops we have here. So to my ear, that sounds a little bit weedy by itself. This has the kind of breathiness, I think. This one in particular, do you hear there's a kind of around the outside compared to this one, which is more concentrated, that sound. So I might in fact go for these ones that are higher up because there's slightly more weight and kind of richness in the sound. However, this sound is quite similar to this one, although one is obviously louder than the other. So I'd like them to be a little bit contrasting so that you can hear them quite distinctly from each other, balanced in such a way that the left hand is just slightly stronger than the right, played by itself. It needs to be because you hear the higher notes more clearly. This is why if you're playing those, so the same hymn tune again. You can hear the tune very clearly at the top, because it's at the top. The middle parts, if I asked you to sing back the alto part, that would be harder than asking you to sing back the soprano part, for instance. So the lower parts, if they're going to be clear, need by necessity to be a little bit stronger to cut through.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's actually a good thing that this is a bit stronger in the middle, but I think now the right hand's a little bit too quiet, so I might look around a little bit more. I can see that, well, what I'd really like to be able to do would be to couple the quiet and the swell together, so that I can use this nice flute sound, which is high pitch, with this at the same time. The effect would be this. Sounds quite nice. Actually, now that I've heard it a bit more, maybe I don't know that so much. So maybe I'll go back to plan A then, which is these two, and then change the left hand to make the balance better. So I might get rid of one of these big stops. These now sound too similar to me, so I'm going to try a different combination. And it's this process of trial and error. I still think that the right hand is a little bit too loud, so maybe I'll shut this box here to make these stops a bit quieter. Now you can barely hear the right hand, so this is a bit different, and it's harder with this organ because you can...
There's no intermediate.
Exactly, because otherwise, unless I have my right foot on this thing at all times, I can't really do very much about this. It is I've done something in a lot of places where I do just slightly rewrite the piece so that I can have my right foot over here the whole time, so that I can be a bit flexible. This isn't going to be possible here because I've got a more involved foot part, so I'm going to keep this open. I'll try a different combination. I still don't like that very much. Something wrong with that, something missing. That sounds a little bit cold by itself. It's a bit harsh. I'm looking for something to kind of make it a little bit kind of warmer, I think. So I'm going to try this again. And actually, on a second hearing, that doesn't sound so bad to me.
Because you're now hearing it in contrast to the one that you didn't
yeah,
like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I could actually, I could make this keyboard do the same as this keyboard. I don't like how this stop sounds on this note. It's got this nice kind of fullness the rest of the time. This one sticks out a little bit. Do you hear it's a bit different from? It sounds a bit kind of reedy compared to the other notes. Maybe I'll just have to make do with it, I think.
And it's not something where you could, whenever that note came up, you muck about with the stop on.
No, exactly.
That's too much.
There are some instruments. I did a recital in Thaxted last year on this amazing instrument from the 1700s, which was great and very interesting to do. But the pedal board was half the length I'm used to, and it was tuned in a funny way, so I had to transpose some things, and I had to also kind of really rewrite the pedal part a lot to try and make do without the pedal notes that were missing from this short keyboard. Anyway, that's not the case. So let's keep going. I think I might just try out a little bit and see how it sounds. I've got to think about this pedal as well, because this is quite a weak sound by itself. So maybe I'll do a bit of coupling. It's a little bit weak to me. Let's try one more. Have a go with this and play a little bit and see how it sounds. I'll just probably go from where all the parts come in together to save a bit of time, which is what you need to think about if you've got only 3 hours to set up 40 minutes of music. To my ears, the right hand sounds a little bit quiet, but I'm now wondering whether that's because where I'm sitting is giving me a slightly skewed sense of how everything is speaking, because all the pipes are way above our heads, and because it's quite a resonant place. I wonder if actually the balance is rather different downstairs. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to quickly put my phone on voice memo, go downstairs and record a little bit, and then play, come back and listen, and then see how it sounds. I've also got to think about where the audience might be sitting as well. Probably there'll be a few back here, I guess, to kind of, well, I do this bit if I turn up late for a concert. I don't want to go and sit right in the very, very front. But probably most of them are going to be this way, sort of towards the middle, so I'll probably put my phone somewhere about here. And then try again. I sometimes worry when I'm doing this sort of thing that I'm wasting some valuable setup time by spending all my time walking up and down the stairs and listening back to recordings, but actually, because in some places it's a bit of a trek from the organ loft down to where the audience are, but it's I think actually on balance one of the best ways to spend your time is doing that so you can hear how it actually sounds. So we'll try a little bit, just a few bars. what I'm now also thinking is that because I'm now playing a little bit, I can feel that the church is not totally warm. So I'm now thinking, what am I going to do before the recital to get my hands as warm as I can? I'm going to go and buy a cup of tea from down the road, and not to drink it, just to hold, before it starts.
Yes.
Try to see if the church bathroom's got a hot tap in the sink, for instance. I can just run my hands under for a little bit. These considerations come up as you're kind of preparing as well.
Yeah.
I was playing a recital a few weeks ago in the town where I went to uni, and decided that I'd sit outside a coffee shop with some friends before it started, and didn't wear any gloves, and it was freezing cold. And I thought, I'll be fine, it'd be nice to see my friends, Didn't think for a second about what am I do to my hands. And I arrived then at the venue 10 minutes before it started, and had to play this piece that starts in a very fast way, like this, with all the keyboards coupled together. And it was really heavy, and it was terribly splashy because my hands were just too cold to do it. Anyway, so let's have a listen and see what we think.
Okay.
So what's interesting is that the right hand sounds much clearer down. Do you hear that as well?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I can
yeah.
completely hear how much clearer that sounds.
And it makes such a difference, and it means, I could spend, half an hour here at the instrument, at the console, just thinking about what sounds are nice, or I could spend 15 minutes playing, 10 minutes walking to and from where I'm up with my microphone. Actually, much more valuable to do that because you can hear what the audience is going to hear that way. You can also hear that the sound of the sort of timbre of the two different keyboards is much more similar than it is here, I think, as well. Which is not what I'm after at all. So that gives me some ideas about what I might change. So I think I'll probably, the first thing I can do is I can shut these 12 shutters right away.
So what did you shut?
I can shut these the wooden shutters that are in front of that these sets of pipes. I can just shut that, which will make it a bit quieter. That will help.
So now, where I'm sitting, you can hardly even hear.
Hardly hear it, yeah. I suspect, though, from what we heard on here, that probably bounces just about fine.
So now you were going to change it back to what we had before?
The first time? Yeah, okay.
Where you thought it sounded better down here? So that is chalk and cheese.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it?
But you still weren't quite happy with that?
I wasn't so happy with that because I think that the right hand and the left hand sound too similar, and that the left hand isn't. I'd like the left hand to just be. I'd like it to be like a chorus of cellos and violas playing the tune, whilst we have sorts of violins and flutes playing this kind of lovely improvising melody over the top. And I think that at the moment the effect is it's just a bit too heavy in the right hand for that to happen. So I'm now going to try something different. I'm going to try and rearrange the stops a little bit to see if I can find a better solution.
Okay. I'm coming back up.
Okay.
It's the lower parts that you want to make stand out a bit more.
Yeah. Or just trying to make the right hand just sound a little bit lighter. So I'm going to try some other stuff now. I'm going to try putting one of the stop on the top and make it quiet. Try some other stuff as well. I'm going to try putting this onto. So I'm listening to how long this sound echoes in the building. So I reckon that this keyboard probably sounds quieter down there from how it sounds up here. This is about the same. This is louder. What do I do? A bit stuck. That's probably too strong. This is probably too soft. This is a little shorthand for now. I'm going to stick the microphone just a bit behind us.
How many phones have you lost that way?
There you are. See, the right hand's rather louder there, but I don't mind that so much because it's a very different sound. It's that kind of slightly lighter, flutier sound, which makes it distinct from the left hand, not in terms of volume, but in terms of kind of
It's
like
different
instrumentation.
sound, yes.
So what I did was I put the right hand down on this bottom keyboard here. I was playing on the top before, now it's on this bottom keyboard with these two stops here. Then I took what I was using on this top keyboard and I've coupled it to the middle keyboard so that these, so that these two then did the same, as you can see. So the stops I was using up here before are now down here too, and using a different sound altogether for the right hand. So this is the other option now. I'll try it out. Yeah, I don't like that so much. So I think now what I'm going to do is I think I've now decided that I'm going to use this slightly louder but rather timbrally different right hand to then contrast with the left hand, and that's how they're going to play off against each other. So that, I think, is me decided. I think that's what we're going to do.
Cool.
Good. Books tutor. This is the one that I flummoxed myself. Well, I flummoxed myself by getting my hands all cold before I did it in a recital.
Ah, right.
It's got lots of different characters. The first one is very declamatory, very bold, and sort of like a dog with a bone in its mouth. It's the kind of image that I have when I play this. So it needs to be quite strong. I'm going to use trumpets, and I like opening recitals with this because it's very kind of, it's quite sort of startling. I think the opening
Wakes
to this.
everyone up.
Wakes everyone up, exactly, yeah. So I'm going to put on quite a lot of stops with this, I think. Yeah, see, what I said before about the kind of like quite fronty, nasally sound of these stops, I like it here because it's got that kind of edginess to it, which kind of suits what I'm going for. I've also got to think about the fact that I'm going to be cold and I play this in a concert later, if there were a concert, so I don't want it to be too heavy. So
it's interesting because, I mean, it is cold in here, but it's not freezing. I've definitely been in colder churches.
It's not freezing,
but it is just cold enough to
make the fingers a little bit stuck. Yeah, so I don't want to couple the keyboards together at the start, ideally. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. Okay, I think I've decided for this first section. This doesn't require quite so much kind of nuanced balance because it's going to be loud either way.
Yeah, you're kind of just like... You're really going
just get it going, yeah.
I mean, it feels like quite fun to play.
Yeah, really fun to play, yeah.
If you do it right.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
you are, remarkably.
What I really like doing here, because it's got this big pedal tune, on a big organ with lots of pedal stops, I like to really get all the pedal out that I can, just to make it that really kind of slightly juggernauty, kind of thunderous sound. Here with our just little one, we can't, but I can use only one keyboard's worth for the hands, and couple all three keyboards down to the feet. So as you can see, all three are going down with the feet here, which means that I'm leaving a little bit in reserve for the feet to be the kind of prominent part when they come in. So. So there's our declamatory bold first section.
That's really, really funny.
It's cool, isn't it? So I think that's the sound that I like, and you can tell by how quickly I how quickly I found that to be nice, that's the one to use. I think instinct is important, and if you think something sounds good, then why waste time trying to change it? You know?
Yes.
As in when you can when something feels right, that's when you've got to kind of go with it.
I don't know how much the way you were playing with the first one meant that the decision on this one was quicker.
Yeah.
Because you were feeling where everything was.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you've got a sense of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the first piece is always going to be the one that takes the longest to figure out, because then you know what the stops sound like, you know how they all work together. The first one is the kind of one where you experiment with what you're doing. So I sometimes rearrange the order of the pieces from a concert when I'm preparing, so that the one that has got the most scope for kind of experimenting with sounds is the one that I practice first, so that I get kind of a decent sense of what the overall palette of colours is. Hello. Hi.
We're about to start the Mass. Give us a lovely introduction to the Mass at 12.
Okay, will do. I might actually just make something up, I think, for this Mass.